Okay, I would just like to thank everyone for joining 5D this afternoon for our power session. This afternoon, we have Lucy Canary presenting on unlocking the energy and potential of your people, right? I think this is really a lot around motivational that Lucy's going to be speaking to today. So I'm anxious to learn and listen from her. But before we begin, I would like to state the land acknowledgement. So 5D Teaching and Learning Center is located on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge them as the past, the present, and the future caretakers of this land. As educators, we are all appreciative to build a community here. As stewards of knowledge, we are in the process of learning more about how we can advance our relationships with the Indigenous people and uphold the values of collaboration and inclusivity in all that we do, right? So without further delay, Lucy, I'm going to turn it over to you. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, and there we are. And now you should be able to take control.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I so appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with everybody, and wanted to go through just a few slides, but most importantly, have some discussion and some input and guidance from you on your experiences as it pertains to how do you tap into energy, both for yourself as well as for the people around you that you're part of. So, please let me know if you're having any difficulty envisioning these slides. And at any time, don't hesitate to interrupt me. I'd love to hear from you and your input. So I wanted to start off by, you see this lovely image here with people with t-shirts that spell out the word team. And I wonder, what comes to your mind when you think about what is it that, what's the characteristics, of a high-performing team, or what turns a group from just being a group of people into a high-performing team? Any thoughts that come to mind?
My first thought, Lucy, if I could, is energy.
Okay. Any other thoughts? So I think it probably fits, that phrase fits quite nicely, Nancy, with some of the bullets that I'm going to suggest, because I kind of love the umbrella phrase of psychological safety. I think that, and I believe that energy is kind of interwoven through most of these, that, to have the self-awareness of the individuals and the group, that to have the respect and the values that all voices matter, that there's care and compassion, that all leads to building trust, that you're able to listen, that there's a respect for work-life balance. My goodness, the world is complicated right now, and each of our lives are just so complicated as far as hybrid workplaces and just incredible economic factors that people are having to deal with. So I think that I love the phrase energy that you popped out, and I think that it's interwoven through each of these bullets here. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that and introducing what I'm going to call a lens that will help share some information on what I call a motivational profiling tool. And during the course of the conversation with you, we'll be introducing some phraseology or a language of motivation, and then in our conversation highlighting the impact of the motivational footprint that both for ourselves and those around us, and hoping that it'll be a little bit of a catalyst for, as we're chatting together, that you may have some thoughts about what is it that motivates you or your teams or how you show up or just even your tribe, your personal connections. And there's I was looking for some word clouds to say, because there seems to be a lot of thought when people hear the word motivation. And I wondered, if this word cloud actually resonated with you, if these were some of the words that came to mind when somebody said, "Are you motivated?" and what does feeling motivated uh, feel like to you? Any of those words resonate, or do you have other words that you would add?
I I don't know with Sam or Mark if anybody else has any ideas, but I certainly I think these really capture them well, Lucy. But and I especially I just want to say I really love the happy because to
Oh,
me being
nice.
motivated is the happy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, I like the challenge. I think the challenge is very motivating. If
Oh,
things are too easy,
nice. Nice.
become
I love it.
stagnant, you're not as motivated.
Yeah. So the tool that I'm going to share is built around very much around the concept of energy that Nancy has already mentioned. And it really speaks to the fact that motivation in many respects is invisible. It's kind of like electricity that you really can't see it, but you sure know when you don't have it. And you sure know when it's present when you're around other people. So it's kind of like what fuels us. And maybe we don't physically show ourselves in this manner, but I think that there's that connection inside us when we're motivated. We're feeling like we're getting ready to get off that chair. And the motivational maps profiling tool that I wanted to share with you was developed by a gentleman by the name of James Sell, and he's a educator, many years as an educator, very well renowned, published author on the books of motivational, and also has worked extensively with corporations as a business consultant. And through his experiences, as well as other research, he's really delved into human motivation, and he's built this tool around basically, many of these that you're already aware of: Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the career anchors, and the Enneagram, which is not necessarily used as often, but it's a really important psychometric tool that people value. And out of that, he's come up with an algorithm that very simple assessment tool, but the algorithm actually identifies our individual key motivators and the level of motivation that we have associated with that, each of those motivators. And I wanted to share an example with you today as we go along here. So basically, it really looks at motivation in the concept of three clusters. One is relationship, achievement, and the third is growth. And so it's a self-perception inventory that you take. It takes about 15 minutes. And it basically is measuring motivation, your motivation through your relationships, your motivation through your own achievements, and motivation as it appears through your own individual growth. And there are basically 9 motivators attached to each of those 3 clusters: the relationship, achievement, and growth. And if I go along on my left across the screen here, there's a group that are associated with relationships, and they're all kind of what you would expect them to be. They're tied to a sense of belonging. They're tied to the need to be recognized, to be seen, tied to social esteem, tied to being secure and safe. And when you see the word friend there, it's not talking about Facebook. It's not talking about how many friends you have. It really is being attached to a community. So that's kind of that relationship with the overarching themes. The achievement side, you're looking at more of how you take knowledge and resources and leverage them in such a way that you're going to be them in the world that's really going to be building something. So it's very much around building and leveraging and maximizing the use of resources. On the far right, my far right, the growth one is about the big picture. So it is very much about making meaning. So we've talked about the friendship and sense of community. We've talked about making a contribution and building something. And now we're into that, a set of a set of motivators that really talking about how do I make meaning? How do I make a difference? How do I be a free spirit and leverage my ideas and really get out there and change the world. So that's kind of the clusters and the 9 motivators that come out of the research and are very much a factor of this tool. Any questions as I go along here?
So, so I think, Lucy, I do have a question, if that's okay. So when I do the profiling, right, these are the 3 categories that I'm going to be able to assess where I fall within my motivators, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to take you through an example of what a profile looks like. So hopefully that'll
Okay.
be a little clearer, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so just to give you again a little bit more context before we get into the profile that Nancy has alluded to, I have that same image and then a table below, and it's kind of on a continuum. And so once again, if I look at the relationships, and I go down the column and I look from a focused communication style, the way they make decisions, relationship dominant cluster is, as we talked about before, very much focused on people rather. So therefore, when you communicate, that theme is really important. So telling stories, using metaphors, showing pictures, all of that helps to describe relationship and sense of belonging is that language is really important in communicating with someone whose dominant cluster is relationship. They're very focused in their decision making on how a particular decision is going to affect individuals. And therefore, it won't surprise you then that probably when it comes to being open to risk and speed of decisions, they're quite cautious because they really want to be reflective that no one's going to be left behind, no one's going to be negatively impacted in any way by this situation or decision that's made. We'll move over along into the achievement. There's a slight shift as far as the continuum. They're focused more on things. So when you communicate with someone whose cluster is achievement dominant, they want to know more about data, details, evidence. And they want to know when you're communicating to them, how is what you're sharing going to help them grow or achieve the end goal that they have, the priority that's in front of them, that they have enormous responsibility and a sense of responsibility in achieving. And so it's not that they're avoid risk, but they're open to risk, but they really need to be able to see how that is going to, any decision that's made, how the data is going to help to substantiate that if they take that risk and they make the decision right away, that it's going to achieve the end goal. And then the far right, which is the growth one, you probably can imagine, they're probably not as at all constrained about taking risks and speed of decision because they're big picture. They're focused on ideas. They're following their gut. They're looking at instinct and experiences, and they carefully assess that. So they're not restless, but they very much build on those experiences, and they'll make decisions really fast, and they will absolutely take risk. But it's friendly risk. It's not reckless. It's friendly risk, and it's again from a compass perspective. How's it going to help me set the compass? Any questions on that before I leap into a profile?
No, I do have a question. I actually find this quite interesting. So if I ask too many questions, I apologize. So when we do the profile as a leader, if I got my staff to do this, I would understand more effectively what motivates them, right? And how I should approach it. Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to understand what their motivators are, but you're also going to understand the level of motivation that they have at this point in time.
Okay.
And so you get that from an individual, and then you actually can do a team one as well. So then you can say, you know what, we've done a team one, and my goodness, 90% of the people in our team is growth. And depending on your business, that might not be a good thing. And it doesn't mean that there's a bad profile, but it just means that you need to be aware of 90% of your team have a growth profile, that there needs to be other things supplemented to make sure that the achievement and the relationship piece is taken care of.
I have a question
Yeah,
about
sure.
that. Sorry.
Sure. No,
Can you
please.
can you be a mixture
Yes,
of
yes,
those?
absolutely. And that'll come out hopefully when I show you some of these images.
Okay.
So there's a variety of there's three primary pieces of information that you get, but there's all sorts of nuanced pieces as well. So this is an example of someone who's got a very strong technical background and is going through a transition. So a very significant transition has impacted from the external in life. And when we did the profile, these are how the 9 motivators fell out. So you can see on my left, there's a searcher is their highest motivator. And that's at 37. And I draw attention to that just because anything over 30 is a must-have. So in this person's situation, they really can't function if they don't have the opportunity to be a searcher. Other ones, you know, would have a lower number. They're kind of nice to have and they really enhance the performance. But the over 30, if you don't have it, that really is paralysis that comes with it. So I draw your attention to that. And then I'm just going to look at the top 3 because we tend to take a quick look when we do the profile. What's the top 3 and what's the lowest? So in this case, the top 3, searcher, expert, and defender. And if you go for the colors, actual fact, it represents the 3 clusters. So this is a person that has their top motivators, one in each of the clusters. And I draw your attention to this just to make the fact that it's really important to know your top motivators and whether you're satisfied, but it's also really important to understand how they interact with each other. And for example, the searcher, which is a growth, part of the growth cluster, is like, I'm going to get new information and I'm going to get out there and I am really going to make a difference. I'm looking to make meaning here. The defender is there, and the defender is very focused on security and stability. So the defender is saying, whoa, wait a minute. You need to slow down now. What is it going to do as far as security and stability is concerned? And then the expert is saying, do we have the resources? And what is it really going to achieve if we go off in that direction? So it's really important to know your top 3 motivators, but it's also really important to know if they conflict with each other. And so in this case, what happens to this person is that it actually paralyzes the person because the searcher is so strong. And when the voice of the expert and the defender starts, that volume increases, it actually paralyzes the searcher. And so actually there's a paralysis that sets in. So like I say, just going to show you highlights, but there's some real nuances here that really you can imagine not only is important to an individual, but it's also important to a team because this could be a profile of a team, right? You could have a team that has searcher, expert, and defender, and you have that paralysis that comes from the fact that they're operating from very different needs. The next thing I want to just draw your attention to is the lowest motivator. And the lowest motivator, sometimes it's just interesting to know what the lowest motivator is, and it's really not relevant. In this instance, this person is in transition. So they actually have to get out there and sell themselves. And so when star is the lowest, that's a problem. Because their ability to be able to own their space and then communicate that, you know, this is who I am, that's really, really, not only is it low, but it's below the dotted line there. So it's really low. Other times that lowest motivator may be, so for example, if you're a leader of the company and director is really low for you, it can really affect your job. So the other example I gave was more contextual, but it may be a problem from a job function that you have a motivator that's very low relative to what your job function is. So the top 3 motivators are important to get an understanding of, and then the lowest motivator is important to get an understanding of. And then the question is, if you look at those top 3 motivators, are they being satisfied? And in this instance, if you look at the scale of 10, the expert is 8 out of 10. So clearly there's a high level of satisfaction there, but the searcher and the defender are 2 out of 10. So this person is not being, their motivators are not being satisfied. So that's part about us talking about energy and the fuel that drives us. That's being really compromised in this person. And then if I take you to a gradient like this, where this is kind of where we look at motivation on a scale, you can see a 0 to 100, where 100 is your optimum. Most people are kind of in the 85 that are really functioning at higher levels. And in those instances, when they get an 85, they're focused on, okay, how do I stay there? How do I ensure that something doesn't untoward happen so that I actually lose some of my motivational performance? If you're in that low end of the 0 to 35, that's a big problem. You really are in a paralysis stage and you really need probably some external intervention. So if I pat back for a second and ask you to just look here, and you see that very low for the searcher, very low for the defender, 8 out of 10 for the expert, take you back here. Where do you think this person fits on this gradient?
You're gonna have to flip back for me again.
Sure.
I'm gonna go, okay, all right, okay, got it.
I think she's between 60 and 70, maybe. I think it would be declining, right? Because she would start to paralyze. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's an important point that you're making there. So the person's actually 38%. So that's kind of important for the person to know. It's really important for their manager to know. For your information, they took this assessment 6 months later and they were then 70. So knowing and understanding what the motivators were, particularly how the motivators were conflicting with each other, allowed the person to take on some of this paralysis and really dramatically take them up to a higher level. So that's kind of some of the information that you get out of this. You get the top 3 motivators, you get the lowest one, you get some sense of how they interact with each other, and you actually get a personal motivator audit, which is a percentage that gives you a sense of overall, how are you performing? And then on the cluster side, this is another piece of information that you get. You get an overall rating as far as your dominant cluster. So in this instance, this person's dominant cluster is growth. And as we talked about before, when we looked at that table, the clusters kind of influence how you make your decisions. So you can see when you're in the growth mode, it's very much about how can I make and shape the big picture and how can I make meaning. Whereas when you're in a group with people who are achievement focused, you can see where there could be some misunderstandings and conflict associated with that. Or even with the relationship people, that the growth people may want to take off in a direction, and the relationship people are saying, wait a minute, have we really considered the personal and individual impacts of any of these decisions? So hopefully that gives you just a little bit of a sense of kind of the information that you glean, or a bit of the footprint that you glean as an individual, and then you can also roll it up into a team, and how then it can help you sort of give some thought to, okay, how am I showing up? How am I making decisions? And how can I leverage and maximize my abilities based on that information? And so if I take you back now to this table again, and I pause and I throw back out to you to say, is there anything that tweaks for you that you've seen this that says, gee, I can think of a circumstance where either you were experiencing this, or in another environment where you could say, gosh, I could see where this could be a problem?
I don't know if I can see where it's a problem. I can certainly see it from a leadership perspective, how useful it could be, because motivation is really important within our workplace, right? So yeah, I see a lot of value in it from a leadership perspective, but from a personal perspective, yeah, I think it would be very beneficial as well, right? To sort of understand more clearly where I am and maybe look for solutions.
And I think we've touched on this before, that, typically when you're putting a team together, you're really looking at the skill sets and the experience and their availability and what are your resources. But really, does the conversation ever come to what are the motivational needs of the individual and the drivers of the team as a whole? And, because it's so tied to the energy, it really has an enormous impact on the ability to communicate with each other and therefore maximize the impact.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's good. Okay. All right.
So then just one more, I guess, building up on the points that you were making then, Nancy, thoughts on ways that you could use it as a leader or from an organizational perspective?
Mhm. Yeah. I'm sorry, is that like a question for us, Lucy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see it useful to be able to sort of, I think sometimes we're really busy and we don't, as a leader, we're so focused on other things, we don't see where our team is and what the problem is. I mean, it can be communication, we often consider communication as a problem for our teams. But I also think now you've brought more to life for me that motivation is a problem. So if I can figure out where the core of the issue is it the dynamics and people are sort of frozen? I think was that what you used, sort of frozen?
Yeah,
They're not functioning.
the
Yeah.
conflict can create a paralysis where.
Yeah. This would be very useful to sort of um, unpacking what the problem is, right? Does that make sense when I say that? Like just to literally unpack what really is the problem within the team, the functioning of the team.
Yeah.
So you can
I-
really drill it down and then work because I'm assuming that if there is a problem with motivation within this profile, you have some tools or advice or direction for us as to how we can resolve this frozen issue with respect to motivation.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but before this, I always kind of thought motivation was kind of like a bucket. It was either full or it wasn't. And you were either motivated or you weren't. Oh, and I've often was exposed to that phrase in a very negative light. Oh, you're not motivated, so therefore you're lazy,
Yeah.
And one of the things that I gleaned so much and that was so powerful for me was the fact that it's not at all about being lazy. It's these 9 levers, and it's where they're set.
Mhm.
And if one understands the 9 motivators, I had a mentor one time who said to me many, many years ago, and I always remembered, he said, nobody ever comes to work to do a bad job.
Mhm.
And this sort of reinforces for me that's a reality.
Mhm.
If people are not so-called performing, it's because the levers are not set in the right place.
Mhm.
And we have so much opportunity to rearrange those levers to allow the person to and they may not know what levers need to be pulled themselves. So it's such a powerful tool.
Yeah.
So I guess just looking at this, like I see it's very, very useful in anything to do with team building, in anything to do with recruitment. Organizations
Yeah.
now, if they're hiring a particular skill set into a already formed team, they're very much sitting and saying, what are our dominant clusters in our team? What are our priorities for the next period of time? And can we round out the team by the knowledge that we have now? In retention, of course, in onboarding, whether it's bringing a brand new person on or whether it's actually just moving people around from a project perspective, of really sitting down and thinking, okay, how is that affecting? What is that energy that the person's going to be bringing? We got multi-generational teams now, and there's a whole sort of presentation I can do on if you look at the different the difference, between the millennials and the boomers and the different generations and so on, it really, really speaks to the fact that they have very different motivators. And if we could just understand that, it'd be so amazing and what we could learn and leverage. And then just the final thought is just in developing, whether it's performance development or just developing training plans for organizations or teams. It really, if you've got a group of people who are, I'll go back and say, who are all searchers, there's a certain way that you're going to roll out a training program for a group of searchers. Or if they're stars, you're going to roll it out in a slightly different way. So it can be sort of an influencer in making some of those decisions.
Yeah. Sounds like a wonderful tool, to enhance the performance, right, for teams, organization, in many, many respects, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sharing. Is there any other? You have more information?
No, I'm just going to summarize. This is the last slide. So I just wanted to make the point that there's no bad profile.
Okay.
They're all excellent because they all represent an energy snapshot of an individual or a team at a given point in time. And then building on the next bullet, it's very contextual. It really reflects on what is happening in that moment. I want to make the point that it measures and monitors motivation, but also, going back to that invisible point, 70% of all of our decisions are made on a subconscious basis. And if we can understand motivation and those emotional drivers, then they become visible, and then we become much more conscious about why we're making the decisions that we're making. Also want to make the point that there is a correlation with performance, and you can be a really, really high performer and yet be demotivated. But the reality with time is you're actually going to be burnt out. But it's really important not to tie performance and motivation together. And also the final point is that it is nothing to do with skill sets, that connection to the energy that fuels you has got absolutely nothing to do with whether you're a highly skilled individual. And so I close with wishing for each of you that you and your teams connect with whatever energizes you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Lucy. It's very informative, right? And as I said, I think it's a very valuable tool for organizational leaders, managers, supervisors, to sort of learn more about this, right? So I really appreciate you sharing with us.
My pleasure.